Welcome to All Things Seniors, a podcast for caregivers. If you are a caregiver or someone who is looking to learn about challenges and solutions pertaining to seniors, you are at the right place. We created this podcast to support all caregivers so that while you are driving, cooking, or working out, you can listen to those episodes from this podcast which pertains to your needs the most. In each episode, we will have an industry expert who will share their wisdom and knowledge with you to help you better serve your loved ones. So let's dive right into All Things Seniors.
Hello, and welcome to All Things Seniors. Did you know living as an older person in your own home brings its own challenges, but at the same time, we know that aging in place is the best way of aging. So we are so blessed that today we have Margot McWhirter with us. Margot is a registered occupational therapist and founder of Inclusive Aging. Margot has over 25 years of experience in this, and she really knows what she's talking about. Welcome to our episode, Margot.
Thank you so much, Rafiq. Really pleased to be here and speaking with you and your listeners today.
Absolutely. Margot, we've been talking about just before our recording started, and now as well, you heard these statistics. Tell me, what's your take on aging population in Canada? How do you see it?
As of right now in Canada, there are actually more Canadian citizens over the age of 65 than under the age of 17. So that really speaks to the makeup of our population and the fact that, as you had introduced when you were describing my biography, I really believe that older adults today and into the future, based on my past experience, both personally and professionally, really are a major contributing force, life force, and really valued members of the neighborhoods and towns and cities where they grew up and raised families, and where we now, hopefully, ideally, all live in intergenerational communities.
You are so right, and I think I resonate. This thought that you just shared, because if you look at today's older adult population, there is sometimes a preconceived notion that somebody becomes 65 and 67, now they're retired, and sometimes people don't give enough value to all the experience these people have. How do in our community, Margot, you think that we should have this kind of a cultural shift and a mind shift so that we value that experience more in coming years?
I think that it takes a group effort, but also on an individual basis to really reflect on what aging means to us. And part of that might include reflecting on our own experiences with older individuals. Because if through personal or professional experience, or as business owners and operators in communities, if the experiences that you've had involving older adults have been less than positive, and certainly in a society where there's a lot of ageism and ageist messaging about growing older, then we may tend to treat all older adults with or through a lens of negativity and stereotyping.
You use the word successful aging in place. What is successful aging in place means versus maybe, for example, like not so successful aging in place? What do you mean by that differentiation?
Yeah. So successful or success, I would suggest, is really person-based. So what is successful to you might be different than what success looks like to another individual. When we're talking about successful aging in place, what I would suggest that means is that people are allowed to continue living in their own home, in a community that has services and supports to assist them if need be, for as long as they would like.
Yeah. So in a way, keeping them part of the system, although they live by themselves, and yes, some home modifications have been done to allow them to live there safely, still mentally and cognitively and socially, there has to be some programming available or social engagement available, which keeps them part of the whole process, like the part of the whole life, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We don't lose our capacity to make decisions for ourselves or to have opinions about what's going on in our life. And that speaks back to what I was saying previously about some of the negative stereotyping about older adults. Individuals of all ages, and certainly adults and older adults, should have and be respected and seen as having the ability to decide what a meaningful, happy life looks like for them, so that rather than having people make decisions for them, actually be part of deciding what they want their life to look like, including when it comes to end of life decisions, because part of aging in place can also involve dying at home. And as much as that may be not something that people necessarily want to think about, it's a full life. And that doesn't mean that life ends either at a certain age or after a serious terminal illness. People continue to live and hopefully thrive rather than just survive at home.
From what I heard, there are three primary areas: accessibility, safety, when you talked about balance, and third is quality of life, so that people can still reach and have a normal functional life. Accessibility, safety, and quality of life. Now, obviously, these three things are very important, but at the same time, from the sounds of it, all these modifications will have some costs involved. And some of the seniors who are living with their pension and old age benefits, they might not have a lot of excess cash flow. So stuff like this, is it covered under some kind of a Canadian health system or provincial health system? How do usually people pay for these modifications?
Yeah, so very important to point out, as you have done, that there is a cost associated with these modifications. And actually, there was a recent study that I looked up this week that talked about average costs of modification to make a home adaptable versus accessible. And we're talking about the common areas of the home that are often adapted for accessibility. So it's the bathrooms, the kitchens, and the entrances. It can be something as low cost in terms of a few $100s if there's sort of minimal adaptations that are required, up to tens of thousands of dollars. It's unfortunate that the housing stock in Canada is not already built for accessibility based on universal design principles, which means that they're usable by people of all ages and abilities. Because what's good for an older adult potentially using a wheelchair or a walker is also good for a young family who may be bringing a stroller in and out areas of the home. But to get back to your question in terms of who pays for these renovations or modifications, it does typically fall to the homeowner themselves. So if an older adult is renting, obviously they would need to talk to the landlord. And part of the services that I provide would be to do some advocacy. Otherwise, if it's a private dwelling, then the older adult, family members, etc., might be pooling their resources. And there is the home accessibility tax credit from a federal perspective. And then you would need to consult provincially if there's funding programs. Unfortunately, I have to say, often there is not.
Wow. So, you know what? Whether at the end of the day, somebody can find money from the system or not, at least listening from you that these things can significantly change positively the quality of life of the person who may be going through, anyways, a lot of changes and challenges in their life, having an occupational therapist coming and giving them accessibility and safety and, improving their reach. At the end of the day, adding and improving their quality of life is so important. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with our listeners today. If any of our listeners have any follow-up questions or they would like to know a bit more about you or your organization, how they can reach out to you, Margot?
Yeah, so I would invite people to first look at my website, which is www.inclusiveaging.com, or they can send me an email at info@inclusiveaging.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure our listeners will contact you if they have any questions, or they will reach out to you via your social platform. Listeners, if you liked today's episode and all the information that Margot shared with us, please subscribe and review it on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to the show. This way, you never miss an episode. Also, check out the show notes for the links, because Margot has shared some great information with us, and I will be pulling up some information in terms of the disability tax credit. And we will share that on our show notes section. We also have some behind the scenes pictures on our Facebook page, All Things Senior. So definitely check that out. And again, Margot, thank you very much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening, you all. I'm your host, Rafiq Panjani, and we will be back next week. Until then, ciao.